you are ready to go from communications when you are ready to pull the trigger and
All right.
start going. It's up
Sounds
to you.
good to me. So you're our planning rep. And do we have our, is it Bennett, member Bennett? Is he coming tonight? Should I wait for him?
No.
Okay.
Is that your alternate?
No, he's our.
Oh, he's,
member.
okay, in which case I didn't hear
You didn't hear he was.
anything from anybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, by that clock, you got a couple minutes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, mine is right at 6:30, but I'm gonna go based on that one.
Sure.
And then that'll give him a couple minutes to arrive and give me a moment to pull up my notes. Which of course I'm not on the Wi-Fi again, because why would it save my Wi-Fi passwords?
You have like stuck on the wall.
Here we go. Okay.
No.
Right, what's the guest password for the Wi-Fi?
Ultimus guest, the O is capitalized, all one word with
Guest,
a
okay.
exclamation point.
That was easier than me looking for
Meridian,
the.
yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's Meridian. Okay, I was
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
Jim's like, wait a second. Wait a second.
Oh, it used to be.
No,
Opus
it's when I was on the
guest.
School board.
Right, there we go. That makes more sense.
Oh, you were on the school board.
For 16 years.
Oh, wow, you're a glutton.
Absolutely. That's coming from this teacher, yes, I would not want to be on the school board.
I got into school HR.
Did you?
Wow.
Assistant superintendent up in Mount Pleasant. Filled in.
That's another that's something also that I would never have the backbone for. That's a lot, you take a lot of hits.
But you did you do school admin like in your,
No, I was an attorney with the AG's office.
oh, yeah, okay.
And then deputy director of community health.
So then they were like, you've been on the school board for this long, why don't you come do that?
No, the state decided they didn't need any more and make my civil service position a political claimant.
Oh, boy. Yes, they do. Okay, there we go. I just like to take notes because that's the. Member Bushing. Okay. All right, well, I am going to go ahead and get started because we are here and we are good to go. We have enough to have a meeting. So I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. Good evening and welcome to the Charter Township of Meridian Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. Today is Wednesday, September 18th, 2024, and it is 6:31 on that clock right there. First, I'm going to be looking for an approval of tonight's agenda. Hopefully everybody had a chance to look at it over the weekend.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Okay, move to approve by Member Brooks.
I'll support.
Seconded by Member Trezise. Any questions or concerns about agenda? Okay, we will move to a, you know what, I did not take roll. We'll do that next. This will be an approval of tonight's agenda, a vote to approve. Member Koenig.
Yes.
Member Brooks.
Yes.
Member Trezise.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Tonight's agenda is approved. And for the person doing our minutes, I will go back and do a roll call vote so that we know who is present. Member Koenig.
Present.
Member Brooks.
Present.
Member Trezise.
Present.
And Chair Mansour is present. Member Bennett is absent this evening. We will move on to number 3 in our agenda, which is a corrections approval and ratification of minutes from our ZBA meeting of June 26, 2024.
I move approval of the minutes of tonight.
Member Trezise, motions to approve, seconded by Member Koenig.
I have one correction though.
Okay, go for it.
Under the number 1, call the meeting to order, the second line says Chair Mansour called the roll of the board.
Yes.
You were out. So
I
just-
was not here, so I did
Oh,
not
let's
make
call
that
it.
change,
Wow,
guys.
good-
Who made it?
good catch.
Who did it?
Me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Other than that, look good.
Okay.
And I will second motion now.
Okay, so seconded with the note that I was not in fact here. I was in Italy. So, sorry, boys. All right. This is a motion to approve unless there's any other notes on the minutes. Motion to approve the minutes from the June 26, 2024 meeting. Member Koenig?
Yes.
Member Brooks?
Yes.
Member Trezise?
Yes.
And as I was not here, I am going to abstain from voting today, so we do pass that motion with 3 votes. We are going to move on to number 4, which is communications, of which there are none of note this evening. We have no unfinished business, so we will go right directly into new business, which brings us to ZBA case number 2409, Playmakers, Inc., 2299 West Grand River Avenue in Okemos.
Thank you.
And Mr. Shorkey.
Okay. As noted, this is ZBA case 24-09, Playmakers at 2299 West Grand River Avenue. They are looking for two different variances. First one would allow more than 40% of a surface area of a single window to be used for window signage, and there are more than one window involved in that request. And then the second variance would allow the total amount of window signage to exceed 10% of the building face on which the window is parked. Staff did receive a complaint from a township resident about the window signage. We did have a meeting with the applicant and explain the complaint. The applicant at that time decided to apply for the said variances. They are requesting that the window signage just remain in place if approved. There are 3 rows of windows on the front of the property, and I'll bring up a picture in a second. The windows in the bottom 2 row are covered with the signage. If you've driven by Playmakers on Grand River Avenue, you're familiar with what it looks like. The reasons stated are aesthetics, but also safety. It's from the road, from the parking lot, it's an opaque covering. People can't drive by, see what's going on inside of what's essentially a shoe store. The window signs are replaced twice a year, but it is a constant covering. This is from the applicant's information, and this is just what I'm talking about. There's 3 rows of windows. It's the bottom 2 windows that are covered, and then, like I said, the motif changes over the year. I can answer questions. The applicant is here. I'll go through just for everybody. There's other pictures here. You can see a close-up of one section of the windows. And that's where they're getting their measurements from, and that's other pictures too. And that's where we're talking about. That's the location.
Great.
So I'll stop there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shorkey. Would the applicant or the applicant's representative like to come up and speak on behalf of the case? You can come up to the podium here. I will ask, sir, that you just state your name and address for the public record.
So I think Brian said basically what we're looking for is to continue doing what we've done at Playmaker since 2016, covering the bottom 2 rows of windows on the front. It is a window perf. Myself, I love the natural light. I love being at Playmakers where you can see inside and outside. It really does bridge the gap of, you think about working retail, maybe in an area where you don't get a whole lot of light. The window perf allows that light to come in and us to be able to see outside. On the flip side, if you're looking on the inside of Playmakers, if you have the entryway on the left side, we have a big merchandising rack there. So if you're looking in from the outside, you're going to see the backside of that merchandising rack. So this window perf, the graphics that we use really block the view of that. You can't see it, but again, from the inside, you can still see out. On the other side is our counter. And, originally we actually had foam core boards with pictures on them in there, but we really want to completely block that entire row viewing the backside of our counter. For security reasons, it just doesn't look great. I mean, you're looking at the back of racks and shelves and all of that. So that is what we're looking to continue to do. In the imagery that we're using, we kind of partner with brands and we do brand imagery. So it's not like a sale. It's not like, hey, save $25 on this or come in and purchase this. We're taking lifestyle imagery from our brands and representing a brand on each side.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Marsh. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak on this case this evening? If so, you may come up to the podium. Otherwise, Mr. Marsh, I'll just have you stay up there. How about that? If there's nobody else that wants to speak on this case, just because that'll make it easier for us to have a conversation with you as we get into our board time. Since I do not see anybody else that would like to make a comment on this case, I will go ahead and close public comment at this moment and get into our board time. So that gives us the opportunity to speak to the applicant and Mr. Shorkey from staff, so we can clarify anything we need to clarify. And ask as many questions as we'd like. So anybody want to get started? Yes.
I guess I'll be the lone
Go
wolf
ahead.
and I'll start.
All right.
For staff, you can feel free to respond if Mr. Shorkey's wrong, but I doubt he will be, because I know he knows this. But if you could, if there's any way, if not for privacy reasons, that's fine, but could you embellish us and tell us what was the reasoning for the complaint?
I don't have that information.
No? Okay.
I don't.
How about you, sir? Mr. Mars, do you have, did they give you a reason why they complained about the signs? Did they not like the way they looked, or?
No, we actually never heard from the person who filed the complaint. It was
Gotcha.
to the township.
Okay.
So.
I did have the similar question, if we had more information as to what the issue was, that we could kind of use that to kind of think about this case in particular. But my question would be, and
No, go ahead.
I'll just piggyback off that, is that the challenge with the variances are that we're allowing any kind of window covering. So that if Playmakers was to move to a new location, or, we do not want you to leave our community. We love having Playmakers in our community, don't get me wrong. But if Playmakers was to go someplace else and somebody else took over, this variance would go along with them. So they could very well put up, everything must go, or, something that would be less appealing. That said, I do love the idea that you do have that window perf. So I'm assuming that means that it's not a full, like you said something about foam core, but it's just like it almost just has small enough holes that the light can come through. You can see out, but you can't see in.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a 50-50 window perf, so that means in reality, 50% of that window is covered.
Okay.
So.
Okay, thank you for that. And just to verify with Mr. Shorkey, what is the amount, I'm trying to look through those images, what is the amount that is actually covered right now?
I think it's 16%
So-
of total window.
Okay, so I can see that
frontage.
I can see no more than 40% of the surface area of the window may be used, but I'm trying to find what
Let
is
me bring this up.
on the, okay, thank you.
And
It's on
let
that. It wasn't at the top. That's what I was looking for it, okay.
And
Thank you. On
Mr. Marsh, you can correct me if
60.
I'm wrong, but here's where I think this is coming from. The 40% is individual windows.
Okay.
And an individual window cannot exceed 40% without the variance.
An
So you
individual window, I see,
Right.
okay.
So looking at this, you essentially have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 24, 7. Okay, but for purposes, it's the windows. And this is defined as the lower 2 rows of the 3 rows of windows.
Okay.
The other thing it says is no more than 10% of the frontage. Now, when you calculated the frontage, you use the entire building of the front?
I
building?
basically
Or you-
use what's 2299.
Okay.
Well, originally it's 2299. You
Okay.
take the old coffee shop or kid store off, and then you take the old country buffet or the Asian market off.
I'm sorry, 9.
Just the address.
Just the address.
Address, yeah.
So just,
Okay.
so it's the frontage that's on page 15 in the packet, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, yeah.
Okay, so not with the addition of the community center room and the.
That is
and the
correct, yes.
Okay,
children's
yes,
store.
okay, that's what I was getting.
Okay, that's helpful.
And so that's where that 16 and a half comes from.
Okay. All right. That's helpful for me as far as size goes. Okay. Any other questions that we have, or?
So with that question, so what's the percent that's allowed to be covered for the front of the building by signs?
Total frontage is 10%.
Okay, I see.
That's, yeah.
So are we granting a variance for the total
There's 2.
coverage
two.
and for the window?
Yeah, you're being asked to approve 2 variances for individual windows, and this would be defined as the lower 2 of the 3 rows of windows. I want to be clear on that.
Right.
Over 40% on those individual windows, and then the total amount, you're essentially being asked for a 6.5%. And 16.5% of the total, of the frontage of the business, rather than 10% of the
Rather than
frontage of the
10.
businon.
Right.
So you're asking for a 6.5% variance as well.
So a 20% variance on the total window area covered and a 6.5% on the total building frontage covered. Correct? Is that what I'm?
Well, the windows are, on the first one, it says no more than 40%.
Right.
From the outside, it looks like those windows are covered.
Okay.
That's, it's 100%.
Not to get super technical, sorry if I'm jumping in.
No, go ahead.
But, so how do we define a sign in this context?
It's the part of the window conveying a message.
So is a,
These have been defined as signs.
okay, so a picture, like a photo of nature is a sign.
It's a window covering.
It's not artwork, it's branding, it's partnership with brands, it is defined as a sign, yes.
Okay.
From a Playmaker's perspective, if I can speak, like, we're trying to fit our retail business in a building that was built in 1957. And, through the years, we moved into that building in 2002. We've met with, experts in merchandising, experts in retail, like experts in security, and how our store is laid out has really come from all of those meetings. With how our store is laid out, though, you necessarily blocking that sight line in, I think is really important. Well, if you're looking on the left side of the vestibule, you're going to see the back of a fixture. And so if we're not going to do window perf, the other question is, what are you allowed to do in this situation? Because you're just going to be looking at the back of a fixture, which isn't appealing for us, is not, I think, from a retail standpoint, that's not a great look for the outside of your business. From a township standpoint, what can we do to make the building represent maybe what the township wants to represent aesthetically? I mean, we want it from a Playmaker standpoint to be very aesthetically pleasing, to draw customers in. Also, as maybe a member of the community, an active member of the community, we want it to represent what the township wants as well. So we really want to work with the township on being able to block the windows, but have it look really, really good and appeal to our customer base.
I could see too that and this may not be a question you can answer necessarily, but without this complaint, obviously this is not, there isn't an existing variance, but without this complaint, would this have been something the township would have touched or just
No.
would have left alone?
No.
So the complaint happened and then they were almost, I want to say forced, you're doing the right thing by coming to the building and planning department to take care of it and be
Yes.
great citizens of the township and great business owners in the township. So they're doing the right thing by coming forward and saying,
Correct.
hey, we want to work with you. We want to be, in business with the township, in our township, and this is
Correct.
where our home is. And there's something about that to me as another representative of the township that I feel like is something that is valuable. We don't have a lot of businesses that are coming forward going, hey, we want to do the right thing. That doesn't happen all the time. Yes, Member Trezise.
As you pointed out, though, if this is approved, it runs with the
It runs
property.
with the property. Yes.
We cannot govern the content of the
Absolutely.
signs. So even if it continued in the same manner, they could change the signs tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And I'm not suggesting that you would do that. I do like the appearance here. The question is the long-term impact if we grant the variance.
Yeah.
I did have a question. You've got two levels of window. How high do you need to go?
So on the left side, our fixture actually goes almost probably right through the A6 if you zoom in on that
Okay.
left side of the vestibule. So on the right side, you could probably get by the first row, but then you're going to be off on the two windows, so you'd have two rows on one and one side on the
I
other.
understand.
So,
Okay.
maybe my question back to the board would be, you can't govern the contents of what's going up there. Could you govern, I think historically in how we've done it, we're again representing our brands through the windows. Could you say that you'd have one logo per side with this variance request?
No.
And
Well, yeah.
Anything
It has to be
content
content
related is off
neutral,
limits.
unfortunately.
On pro, okay, pro or con.
Yeah.
I like where you're thinking, but
Yeah.
or even if it all had to be pictures and no writing or anything, so.
no, they can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, that's part of the ordinance is that we can't govern on content.
Okay.
However, can we make a stipulation in the variance that this window perf, this 50% would need to be used for this variance to be, is that something we could tack on to the variance?
The material?
Material.
Yes, you can. You can regulate material of a sign.
Okay.
So my curiosity in that is that I will be completely honest, that my biggest concern is that it's just because we know that this goes with the building. We've unfortunately had some challenges with that. Approved signage that then has been taken advantage of in different ways. And looking at you, Crunch Fitness. But, I'm sorry, please strike that from the record. But that said, where can we go? What can we do to work with a business that wants to be in the township, that's doing the right thing, that is coming to us saying, we want to be here, we want to do business here, and we plan to be here for a long time doing it. So if it's a material, if we can stipulate a material, is that a way to ensure that we're not getting the signage that we're trying to avoid in the township, which is, and planning and board members will know more. We're trying to avoid it being an eyesore. We're trying to avoid it looking like, not as aesthetically
grocery store
pleasing.
ads.
Right, not as aesthetically pleasing as we're hoping for the township to appear when people are driving through that corridor. So what can we do as a board to get there, I guess is my question. I can look at the criteria right now and I can meet the unique circumstances for sure. I'm gonna struggle with the practical difficulties a little bit here unless we can get to how we can make it more neutral for any future business in this, that potential business that would be in this structure. Minimum action, is anybody able to reach minimum action yet, or does it still feel like it's been too? Because I think, wondering if we could minimize.
Yeah, I understand. I don't have any problem with the 16.5% total usage.
Yeah,
that variance for 6.5% for the bottom windows or whatever, I don't have a problem with.
Yeah.
It's the second row of windows and these, I think Mr. Shorkey indicated that the rule is no more than 40% of a single window.
That is correct.
So each one of these windows is 100%,
Oh,
Right.
which is a design flaw.
It's interesting how the code is actually written, because it is, how I read the code is we're only 10% over the code, because it's window perf. You're covering the entire window with the image, but in fact, you're only covering 50% of that window. So,
And going to your question, that is an option. You can stipulate that it remain the perforated window vinyl graphic material.
Okay.
That's the phrase that the applicant used.
The
in his-
applicant
in
used, we
his- in
can
his
stipulate
attachments.
that. Okay.
And then you're not getting, poster boards.
Right. And
Something opaque.
flat cover.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think though that they could look the same depending on the coloration patterns that we used. Because I thought about the window perf stuff too, and it's like it's only 50% covered. So technically, the square footage that you have that you're showing us is you could reduce that by 50% unless you already did that.
no, I have not done that. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
again, we're trying to be good community.
Yeah, no, I didn't think you were. I was just saying like
So,
that, like
yeah, so if
technically
you
that.
looked at it, yeah, with that lens, that it's technically a 50% window covering per window, then we're only at 10, we're only granting a variance of 10% per window versus the idea that we're granting 60% of a variance.
But if you do that, you better specify the window perf.
Right.
Because staff did not
Well,
read that.
Yes, and I
as a
will, and I,
50%.
okay, so I will say, I very much would not feel comfortable granting variance without a stipulation for window perf. So if.
Yeah, and we
you were
would
gonna
have
support-
no problem with that. And that goes back to my very beginning. We love our business. We love the natural light that comes into it. And a lot of that is allowable by having window perf on there. If you put
Right.
straight vinyl on the front, you're not going to get any light. It's going to
Yeah.
dramatically change the aesthetics that we're going for with the
Absolutely.
business.
Have you explored like cutting the top
The display
in half or reducing it by some size so that then you would be within the first variance?
We have not. That is a custom display that would take quite a bit of work to have that adjusted down. And part of why why our interest would not be doing that is it is a full height display. So if you're thinking about apparel and all of that, you want that height that goes above that window.
So coming from, can I ask Member Brooks and Member Trezise, coming from a planning background, what is when you think of the spirit of this ordinance and why for this window covering, are we looking at more of a safety issue? Are we looking at purely aesthetics and keeping with that kind of look that they want to see along that corridor? Or what is curious about the
Both.
spirit of that?
I think the safety issue is you want the police and whatever may need to look into the building, see what's going on. That's part of it. In the aesthetics, certainly it's part of it that you don't want basically a billboard put up there, and an ever-changing billboard with
That I
pleasant
could-
signs, ugly signs, handwritten signs. I mean,
Right.
that it.
Especially
can get out of
if
hand.
you had to be content neutral, you
Right.
can't control that.
Yeah.
Once it's there, it's there. Okay, that does help.
And if you do drive the corridor, though, you will notice that there is, I mean, that entire corridor, if you drive anywhere in Meridian Township, any business that's trying to use an existing structure to move into, there are, I would say, quite a few businesses that have fixtures, racking, and all of that. And there's ways that there's ways like the window proof that I think well represent what Playmakers is about and hopefully represent imagery that the community can stand by. And there's other ways to do it that I don't think aesthetically are pleasing at all, would represent what Playmakers wants on the front of the building. And I think the overall look for the township is less welcoming, if you will. So, I mean, there's other businesses that have issues with it like this, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the ordinances or why we have them exactly. I haven't been on the planning commission long enough to know all those reasons, but from a master plan perspective, I appreciate Playmakers' use of an existing building and that it does have unique characteristics to it.
Yeah.
And that makes this a little bit, this more nuanced than some brand new building that was built beyond what existing code is.
Well, I go back long enough to remember when it was a grocery store. And they had signs in the windows were not nearly as aesthetically pleasing as these
Yeah.
Playmakers. And I was even here when it burned, so that was
There
in
you
the
go.
50s, visiting my cousin. So I do like the look, and I'm just trying to figure out how we get there.
Yeah.
And I do like the idea of finding that a 50% perfed window represents only 50% of the coverage, and we would grant a 10% variance to allow that.
Yep.
But I think we need to state our reasoning too, as far as why we are interpreting this.
Well, and I think that's where the criteria come in. If we can meet the criteria, then I think that satisfies why we're approving that, but also I would agree. I do think that that's something that absolutely needs to be.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
I have a question. So when we grant a variance like this, and this might be for you, Mr. Shorkey, when we grant a variance like this, can other applicants use that in their rationale?
They can argue it, but legally speaking, a variance on a property is never precedent setting on another property. Each property, no matter if they're next door with identical houses, each property is unique. It's a real estate principle as well.
Okay, that's good to know.
It's different in every state.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to take a look at the criteria and see if we can't see what we can agree on. Criteria number 1 states that unique circumstances are present or exist that are peculiar to the land or structure that are not applicable to other land or structures in the same zoning district, and that these unique circumstances are not self-created. I definitely can take a look just at the frontage of this building, knowing the history, as Member Trezise has pointed out, and know that this is a unique circumstance. We don't have another building quite like this one in the township, and could not have anticipated these individual windows being, in writing a master plan and writing this ordinance. So I will say that, yes, I can meet that criteria. Any questions or concerns on
I think it's a
criteria 1?
stretch in a way, but it is a unique building in that it's got a large facade of individual windows, which make it difficult to apply this particular code provision in some ways sensibly.
Right. Well, and I do think that also, I think as much as we are focused on the windows, I think the interior of the business as well also leads to where we're talking about some of the retail challenges. So regardless of the function of the retail inside of the building, that they're going to have some challenge. I mean, we talked about it needing that coverage for, cash wrap, all those things anyway. So that's, I would be able to find that unique circumstance fairly easily. Remember, Kate?
I was just going to say as well, that looking at this picture, a large portion of the front of this building, because it is older, is glass. It's not like your typical building like you see now, or, just have specific windows, specific areas. If you were to put more signs up there next to that Playmakers, in my opinion, it would almost look a little gaudy. So this allows it to have the signs a little bit lower so you can see them. In addition, I think the whatever the term is that you use for the 50% with the holes in the.
Window perf, yeah, the window
So
perf, yeah.
actually, I think it's a benefit to you because your building is set back a little bit farther than than a typical building along there, off from the road. So if you were to have, you still see 100% of the picture, although it's only 50% coverage, it allows you to still have a picture big enough that people can see it from the road.
Absolutely.
Versus they're still letting light through. It's not a full-size picture because these windows are so large, and the vast majority of this frontage looks like in here. I mean, I can't see the sides, and I haven't driven by there in several weeks, so I don't know what it looks like, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not, ordinary to see a large amount of glass like this on the front of a building unless it's, a row lower, like a Payless shoe store where they had all glass, but it's not going to amount to the amount that you had here. So you're very, I don't want to say limited, but lack of a better term, you kind of are limited on where you can put signage up here unless you want it to be all very high and up by the curved part of the building. Just an observation.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, let's see here. Let me get back to my criteria. Okay, second criteria is strict interpretation and enforcement of the literal terms and provisions of this chapter would result in practical difficulties that would prevent the owner from using this property for the permitted purpose. As I said, this is the one where I'm going to find a little bit of challenge because do the window coverings need to exist in order for the business to exist? And that's where we
Curtains would work too.
right.
So I guess
but-
the question I have for you, you've been on this
Yeah.
commission or board longer than I have. Do we have to meet all 5 criteria?
We have to meet all 5 criteria.
Okay.
And now, like you said about unique circumstances, some of our criteria may be a little bit of a stretch.
Yes.
However, we do, and I think that that's important for, not only for the board to stand behind
Okay.
and for legal purposes, but also for the applicant to know
Okay.
that we've really been able to meet those. And we could come up with a lot of different practical difficulties. It could be branding, as Member Karen just mentioned, that, any other attempts on branding at the outside of this building would likely result in some kind of variance, would likely result in some kind of challenge. And I'm curious, you've mentioned curtains. I'm curious if that would be considered window covering.
It's not window covering, it's signs.
It's not signage.
It's not signage, so it's window covering. Okay, so that's interesting.
So the curtains, we have had in the past mini blinds on the inside.
Yeah.
And I think from a security standpoint, from my perspective, is being able to see out but not in is great. If there was something going to happen, if we felt there was a security risk outside, we would potentially be able to see it sooner than they actually come into the building. Thank God that hasn't happened where we've had anything significant, but there is that consideration as well. From our standpoint, from our manager standpoint, from our people working the counter standpoint, they like that ability to be behind the covered wall where they can still see what's coming in, what's happening in the parking lot, while also being kind of blocked from view. On the flip side of just being a good retailer, I guess, we really like that window perf. If we see someone struggling out in the parking lot with a walker, someone with mobility issues, someone who drops something and we see them, our staff does routinely go out there and help them. And again, if you block that with curtains, if you block that with mini blinds, you don't have that opportunity, so.
Thank you for that, Mr. Marsh. My question about that then relates to criteria. I'm going to put a pin in criteria 2 for a moment, because that would get into criteria 3 for me, which would be securing public safety. And if curtains are allowed, if we're talking about a public safety issue of not being able to see in, but curtains or mini blinds are allowed, isn't that the same? Aren't we? Why is one allowed and not the other? Because that gets me back to the spirit of the ordinance. Is it because of safety and we needing to see in? Because if that was the case, then the window covering shouldn't be allowed either. But is it more about aesthetics?
I think it's more about aesthetics,
Okay,
but I believe that provision has much to do with sight lines and being able to monitor what's going on around the buildings and things like that. Because the zoning or the sign ordinance applies more than just buildings.
right.
And the variance does too. We have to look at that criteria across the board, and in some places, the variance would impact, which has nothing to do with the signage.
Right,
So I think that can be met, frankly.
yeah,
And I think for number 2, a retail store wants to and needs to have its checkout counters near an exit door in order to prevent someone going through checkout, going back in and
absolutely.
shoplifting. It's very difficult to control. So, and with this plate glass in front of them, I think it's a unique situation that that encourages us to allow this variance under our criteria 2.
Yeah. Yes, Member Koenig.
And I would piggyback on what you said, Member Tresice, going back to the 40%. I mean, the 16% I'm not worried about. I mean, I'm not even going to get into that.
Yeah.
But the 40% are, if you were to cut those window signs in half, they may be very difficult to see from the road. Or now you would have sign, open space, it would look incredibly strange just because a large portion of that frontage is glass. It's not solid wall to where if they were trying to put this, I mean, picture this all as being solid, and they're trying to put these huge, 20 by 30 signs on there.
Right,
This board may look at that differently, but because in my eyes, this is unique because it does have a large portion of it that's glass to where the signs, unless they put them all on the top, the signs have to almost be thrown in the glass or way on the sides, and on the wings, you can't really see here, and I don't know what's over there if you have everything over there. But I think that's, going back to number 1, and then, again, to me, the interpretation of it is, if we're gonna hold to the 40%, then each window is gonna have only half a sign on there, if that's what they want. And I think that would just look a little strange to people, and then you still would be able to see in there, it would affect the safety of it, blah, 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 blah.
And if you were gonna build a new building that looks like this with the same amount of glass, your panes are probably gonna be substantially larger. So if you drive down new windows, I mean, we have a lot of glass in the front of the building, but the panes aren't as large as you would see on a new build. So you would get a lot bigger sign.
absolutely, so to take up that 40%. Member Brooks, go ahead.
Mr. Shortcut, I'm coming back to you again. So if this was the vinyl perf or whatever material like that, and it wasn't branded, then would this be an issue?
If it's attached to the window,
Yeah,
falls under the sign code, yes.
Okay. So anything that goes on a window
Usually,
falls under this.
I'd have to look at our sign ordinances to see what the specific requirement is, but typically a sign ordinance will say it's a wall sign if it's within a certain number of inches. So you routinely see like small mom and pop shops in downtowns. They've got displays, right? Those displays aren't windows, but when the stuff gets right up to close to the glass, it becomes defined as window signage. Okay. So regardless of what it depicts, it's on the window, it's signage. It's conveying a message of some sort.
and this board doesn't have any purview over the content.
Right, yeah,
So
no.
that's the hardest part, is that
Yeah.
even if we can't even specify that we can, that's why I asked if we could specify material. We
Yeah.
couldn't specify that it could only be like, let's say the middle row was just a neutral color or something to that effect. We can't, we have no purview over what the actual signs are.
Correct.
Some
Only
of the
the
signs
material.
here are not
Yeah,
product related. They're more like artwork and walking and whatever. They don't refer to.
directly
what it's- Yeah,
branded.
yeah.
Yeah,
So that is
yeah.
not, that's still a sign.
Right.
But that is, at least for when Playmaker says it, that is usually our goal, is to have it a little more lifestyle than product. Occasionally, some product flows into it, but again, and it's never salesy for us, I guess.
No, it's meeting the customer lifestyle, which is, this is, the hardest part about that is that it's all the right things that, you would hope that a business would do. So that's the best part about it, and also the challenge, is that it's exactly what we would hope a business would do. And I think aesthetically speaking, I will jump to, so I think we can meet criteria number 1. I will jump to criteria number 3, which is granting the variance is the minimum action necessary, which would carry out the spirit of the zoning ordinance, secure public safety, and provide substantial justice. I do think that that I could meet that criteria, and that this could carry out the spirit of this ordinance, which I do believe is in our discussions.
Yep.
I'm getting to that it's truly more about aesthetics, and this is what we are leaning towards, is something that is more lifestyle branded without the big neon, not being able to control content. But I do think also that in talking about public safety, this is more safe for a business operating in this building, especially for purposes of protecting your staff and your employees. And I do believe this provides a substantial justice, considering the circumstances that have brought us here today, that we have a business owner doing the right thing. So I can meet that criteria. Member Koenig.
I completely concur with what you said, but I also want to just state my opinion for the record, the minimum action satisfied, because they're not asking for an additional variance. The variance they're asking for is what's currently in place. So the numbers are
Absolutely.
equal. Not like they're asking for another 40 feet or
We're
something.
not growing on it. Yep.
So in my opinion, that's a minimum action.
I would absolutely concur. All right. So let's try criteria number 4, which is granting the variance will not adversely affect adjacent land or the essential character in the vicinity of the property. And I can meet that variance. That criteria. I do not think that there's any neighboring business that would say this is,
So impacting that.
yeah, this is not it will not adversely affect neighbors in the vicinity. And criteria number 5 is granting the variance will be generally consistent with the public interest and the purposes and intent of this chapter. And I do think that I can meet that criteria. I think that we are very fortunate to have Playmakers and have a business in our community that wants to do the right thing, wants to be in the community, that wants to support the community. And, I think that that's something that the township needs more. So I can meet criteria 5. I will just go back to criteria 2. And I think that Member Trezise made a very good case for the practical difficulties of actually physically running this operation and being safe for the employees, and where you could actually put things like registers and checkout and be safe and secure for the business owner themselves, regardless of the actual business that is there. So we could apply that broadly to another type of business that could take that space in perpetuity. So I would be able to meet criteria 2 based on that. What do you think, gentlemen? Okay, kind of there. Okay, so it seems as if we can reach all 5 criteria, which is fantastic. That said, do we have a motion? Anybody want to be
It'd be tricky if somebody knows how to say it, correct?
Well, that's where it comes in, guys. Who's brave enough to try it?
I would recommend in this case, in addition to a motion, we have a finding of fact.
Okay.
That a condition on the motion that they use 50% permeable product that will allow light into or out of the store. Because at night, if you turn the lights on, you can see out, but you can't see in.
Right.
What is that?
It's not in there, but that's just the nature of windows and lights. But with that restriction that that by using 50% permeable, the actual window coverage is 50%, and we're granting a variance to allow that for the windows involved here. And that's one. The second motion is to approve, actually, if we go to 50%, we don't even have to do the 16 down to 10, but we probably should.
Just go ahead.
I think we should just approve it just to be on.
Because again, staff did not interpret that the same way as the applicant did.
Okay.
So we saw a window.
Yeah.
Sign.
Okay.
But I get what you're saying.
So you can put that in something that's logical.
Yeah, your conditioning on the base of, your condition
On
is
material.
that
I
they
would use the
use
full
the,
term.
and I'll use the term that he used in this,
Right.
yeah.
So that's my motion, that we approve the request for the first one, variance number 1 that he's proposed.
Okay, so that is a motion to approve with the stipulation of using the 50% window perf as the only material able to be used for this particular variance.
I would support.
Okay, seconded.
Seeing it right? Okay. Okay.
Seconded by Member Koenig. And any further discussion on that or with the stipulation? Mr. Shorkey, does that make sense?
Yes.
The stipulation there?
Yep.
Okay. All right, then this is a motion. I am, if we are okay with the second variance as well, just going ahead with, I will do a vote just based on both of them together, if that's okay with you, can I
So the second
amend
motion-
your motion?
Certainly, the second
Okay.
is to approve the variance to allow window covering in excess of 10% of the
Okay.
facade.
Okay, so this would be, and I would assume that you would support that as well, Member
Yes.
Koenig, so that, with that amendment. So, yes, Member
Question.
Brooks.
Do we need to set a do not exceed level to that? So you just said,
Oh, okay, it can go up to 16.5%.
Okay, can go up to.
By virtue of the fact that that is the requested variance,
Yes.
that is the
That's what
maximum.
will be,
Yeah, okay,
approved,
that
is
is
the
the max,
16,
yeah. All right,
16.5%.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
you're right, it should be in the motion.
Yes, okay. So this is a motion to approve on the first application, which is for the 40% surface area with the stipulation that the only material to be used will be the 50% window perf. And the second part of the variance application, which is that approval of the signage of 16.5% of the building face. Member King?
Yes.
Member Brooks?
yes.
Member Trezise?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so your variance has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
From the Playmakers family, we greatly appreciate it, so.
Thank you. Keep up-
And you mentioned,
keep up the good work.
Thank you. You mentioned a fire in 1958 or 9.
50 someplace, yeah.
There is one steel beam in Playmakers. All of them are wood. There's one steel one in the back from that fire. So.
Wow.
I will
Look
be
at that.
sending that approval letter out to you before the end of the week.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we will now go to ZBA case number.
Okay.
Back up to the top. There we go. ZBA case number 24-10, 2020 M78, BK Singh, 2020 M78 East Lansing, 48823.
Okay.
Mr. Shorkey.
Let me preface this with, we're dealing with a brand-new ordinance. I expect a lot of questions. It's okay.
All right, let's go.
Okay. The applicant is requesting a variance from an ordinance that was created last year that enabled what's called accessory dwelling units in Meridian Township. There are a number of stipulations to them. Colloquially, you can refer to them as granny flats, things like that, attached or detached, and then there's requirements. You can't, okay. So paragraph F in the enabling section set, one of those requirements is that an ADU shall not be larger than 600 square feet and shall not be larger than the primary structure. Okay. So Mr. Singh, who is the applicant, and he is here tonight, he has requested a variance to allow the construction and subsequent rental for an accessory dwelling unit on the subject property, but the ADU is proposed to be 1,075 feet in square feet in size. So that's the variance. He needs permission to exceed 600 square feet in size for the accessory dwelling unit. This property had a variance applied for back in 2005. It wasn't for an accessory dwelling unit, but the request was to enclose an existing carport and convert the carport into a garage and construct additional living space above that garage. That variance was denied, but there was correspondence between the township and the applicant's attorney, and ultimately a building permit for the enclosure and the additional living space was issued in 2008. My understanding is that the ADU would be on the other side of the house from that. As I said, ADUs were enabled in 2023 under a zoning text amendment. It was approved less than a year ago, November. It is an allowed use in a single-family residential parcel as long as all of the requirements are met. And that's basically it. That's the variance he's looking for. He needs a variance of 475 square feet to proceed with the accessory dwelling unit. Note, there are lots of other requirements that the applicant's going to have to comply with before the ADU is approved. This is just one of those.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Shorkey. Would the applicant like to come up to the podium and speak on the case, or anything additional you want to add to what Mr. Shorkey said? And if you could just state your name and address for the public record, please, sir.
My name is B.K. Singh. I live in Meridian Township, of course. And the ADU in question is a property we bought in April 1995. That happened to be a little over 1,000 square feet back then. And we lived there about 8 years. And then we wanted to add an addition to the existing area of the old house. And so now the current house, the addition is about 1,950 square feet. That's where we are living right now. The ADU in question is that the old residence bought in 95, which is, of course, attached to the same building. And so we have almost 3,800 square feet of total area. The ADU in question is only 1,075 square feet. And the request to get a variance of about approximately 400 square feet or the 600 square feet limit under the ordinance. So the reason I'm asking you is that if ADU is approved, I mean the variance is approved to the ADU, then I say this will add extra living residence for people who are looking for a house in Meridian Township. Plus, this being on the commercial area highway, and most people can live there without using the automobile, for example. And there are the other aspects of the goodness of ADU by approving the variances. I stated the 6 different items in my letter. And if you can go back to my letter, item number 5 is the criteria about automobile. Dependency is not required. We can limit that, and then the ADU can help township community with affordable housing while respecting the character of the neighborhood, stuff like that. So I will abide by all the provisions of the zoning. Also required to have the deed changed to reflect that the portion I'm living right now will be always a primary residence, while ADU will be, could be a rental. So that will be applied to, if approved. the variance. And I think that's about all. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Singh. Would anybody else like to speak on this case this evening? If so, you can come up to the podium and state your name. Okay. Since I do not see anybody that would like to come up and speak on this case, I will close public comment. Mr. Singh, if you'd like to stay there, if you're comfortable staying there for a minute while we start our conversation so we can ask questions as needed, that would be great.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go into our board time on this case. And like Mr. Shorkey said, there's probably a lot of questions. I know I have a couple already.
Excuse me,
Anybody
Brian,
want to start?
Can you show the picture of the houses and the,
Yeah, I would, yeah,
That's what
there,
you're
it's
looking for?
up there, yeah.
so on the extreme left side is the one in question for ADU, while the main residence is the right side, which is approximately about 1,800 square feet. Also, it doesn't exceed the required ADU limit, so it fall under the same provisions.
Mr. Singh, so if I'm looking at this photograph, what's on the left portion of the screen, that is where the proposed ADU would be.
Yes.
So is that an existing structure?
That was the one old structure built, before we bought it, built in 40s.
Okay, but it is on the property.
Yeah, on the property, yes.
So that structure would be removed and then you would rebuild, or you're using this structure as the proposed ADU?
I'm living on the right side of the structure. You can see that yellow, there's a line separating the left yellow and the right yellow. And you see two-story building.
Yes, the two-story building on the right side
On
of
the left side is the one ADU.
Okay, that is an existing structure.
Yes.
That,
The ordinance doesn't require the structure to be demolished and rebuilt.
Okay.
He's proposing to remodel the interior of that portion into a separable, livable unit.
okay, thank you for clarifying. So that is an actual existing structure that we are just now going to relabel as an ADU if the variance and other building permits are.
ADUs are allowed to be attached.
Okay.
They don't have to be
Great.
like separate pool houses or something.
Okay, so there's no separation from the main living structure is necessary for an ADU. Okay, that's helpful.
They do have to be autonomous though. Like, someone has to be able to live in that section of the house
Fully.
without having to rely on,
Okay,
the bathroom, for
Okay.
instance.
okay. So it has to be its own self-existing structure.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Questions? Anybody else?
So, Mr. Shorkey, in the historical reference in like the 2000s, it sounds like there was an ADU built, or there was a permit for something and that was built. What was that thing?
It was additional living space. Back in 2005, I pulled the file. The garage that you see here was a carport. And the request was to enclose that into a garage and extend the house over the garage. And the initial decision by the ZBA, the variance request came from the setback.
Okay.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And the initial request was denied. There was correspondence. A building permit was issued in 2008. Those are the steps I was able to define
Right.
when investigating this.
I may
It
add-
doesn't directly relate to this. It's not on the same side of the house, and it wasn't specifically for an ADU, but we felt we should tell you a little bit about the history of the property and how we got here.
The existing balcony, which is 20 by 8, in the front, you see it, it was part of the living quarters before it was approved. Then
I get it.
on the negotiation, I think they eliminated that 20 by 8, 160 square feet, so it became a balcony. So the area was reduced, so that was the consent, sort of.
Okay.
Yeah, which
That
makes
makes
sense.
sense.
The area was reduced in order to comply, so it pushed the living structure back so that you could meet the setback requirement.
Sure.
That makes sense, yeah.
So-
So that was a Very good plan. Yes, Member Koenig, go
I
ahead.
was going to say, in this instance, I think that probably may help you, because without that addition on there, that was my initial thought was, looking at this is 1,075 square feet. I mean, that's almost the size of a normal single-family house in some areas. And, by nature, as you've probably been told by staff, accessory uses, they have to be subordinate, be consistent, not consistent, but subordinate to the main primary use. So when I first saw this as being 1,075 feet, I thought, wow, that's pretty big. How big is the original home that's already on there? So with this addition, I know you mentioned the square footage, I should have written it down, but what's the,
1,800?
take away from your map, take away the ADU portion, what's going to be the remaining square feet of the rest of it?
It's about 1,900.
About 1,900, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my initial question, was what was the size? Because obviously, you're getting 1,000 square feet, you're pushing,
Yeah. I mean, that's
the
a
limits of
single
being
family home.
accessory, exactly.
Right, that's a single family
And
home.
plus, looking at the drawing, there's bedrooms, there's living room, there's bath, laundry, that could be a standalone, single-family home. But at least in this sense, I think that addition kind of helped you, because that made that physical home structure with these being separate still larger than this accessory use, which is a good thing, because, I've seen it in other areas in other states to where people try to come in and build. I mean, you see it now with people building garages that are bigger than their homes, and I don't know how these townships allow that, because in my eyes, that's not accessory. Your garage is bigger than your house. It shouldn't be allowed, but they got away with it, so be it, and that's, not part of this. But so anyways, I think that, in my eyes, I think this kind of helps your cause with this remain as an accessory use. The biggest issue for me is just the size then, is, he's asking for an additional 475 feet from what was recently approved. So, and I haven't, I've teeter-tottered on that, let's put it that, and we'll get more into that when we probably get to the criteria.
Yeah, and I will just say, my initial thoughts, without even really relating them yet to the criteria, are that it changes things for me, not only the square footage of the existing primary dwelling, but that it's an existing structure. So we're not we're coming in and building a new 1,075 square foot building. Yes, Member Trezise.
But we have to look at the purpose of the ADU ordinance,
Yes.
which was to allow small additions, or reasonably small additions, which would allow them to have two dwelling units on a single plat, which is not allowed in a residential area.
Right.
So whether this is an existing building or added on, it is in effect subdividing a house and calling one an ADU and establishing it under an act which really doesn't envision that, cutting a house in half and claiming it's an ADU. That's a concern I have with this.
When I look at the photo that we're looking at, it looks like there's two entrances on the front in the same spot already. Is the house already split?
It's the part that's jutting out.
Mr. Singh?
That's your question.
Yeah, for Mr. Singh.
Oh, I didn't-
I believe on this photograph, it looks like there's two doors in this kind of porch area that's coming from the front. One has the two lights on either side, and one is on the other side of that building.
I think the one facing east, adjacent to the car, that's the entrance.
Okay, and then what's the other door?
Other side, we had access in case of fire hazard or something.
Okay.
We don't use the door at all, although there is a sidewalk, a small sidewalk, 3 feet wide
So,
from that. So we close the door, obviously, and then use the one door facing east with a ramp in case of handicap. My wife was handicapped, so we use that quite often. So that's the entrance. We put a house number there, 2020, right there. So
Okay,
so you put two doors that in the same spot?
in the same, we call it breezeway, that attaching, what you see, two doors in a
Yeah.
small structure. Yeah, two doors, obviously there, but we don't use the door facing south.
facing the road.
Just only one door we use it, because there's a ramp to it. That's the one.
So another question I had was, in the aerial view, there's a building back behind the left side of the house. What is that?
West side of the, no, it should be north side of the house.
Right here?
That's a storage,
Oh, I see what you mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
No,
that
just
is like a barn, 30 by 40, was
it's a barn.
built in 2008 with a permit.
So was that barn what was, the permit was for in 2008?
No.
No? Okay, all right.
No, that's not part.
No, I haven't.
That's not part. That's-
Okay.
Okay.
That's 30 by 40, you said, so that's 1,200 square feet itself. So that's a good example of what I'm talking about. Without that addition,
Right,
that barn almost wouldn't have been accessory.
right.
It would have been bigger than a single family home.
Bigger
But that was probably predating a lot of the zoning that was here, so
right,
that's a different story for a different day.
yes. And not what the case is regarding, but.
Well, I asked because I
Interesting
wanted
to
to make sure
note.
it wasn't connected in any way.
No, exactly.
Not at all.
No,
Good question.
exactly.
Not at all.
Because that's a good question for that reason, that whether or not that's something that could also be considered an ADU, but it doesn't seem like that's living space. It seems like that's storage space
Yeah.
in the barn, Mr. Singh?
Yeah, that's a storage.
Okay.
We have automobile parked inside. That's the same thing what you see outside that's parked inside now.
Okay,
Other than that, there is nothing there.
okay. Member Trezise, go ahead.
Mr. Shorkey, does this zoning for this space allow for a duplex?
No, it does not allow for duplex.
Okay. Because that would have been the simple way to do this.
If you think rezoning an RR property to.
No. I mean, if it had been allowed.
If it had been allowed.
If it had been allowed.
If a duplex had been allowed in this district, then we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Okay, all right.
Right,
It
that
just
makes
occurred to me
sense.
looking at the aerial photo that, gee,
Yeah.
why don't they just, but, okay.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So, Mr. Shorkey, let's talk about this ADU
Sure.
a little bit more.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, Member Brooks, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So you said that the back house on the property was for cars. Is there another way to get back there?
There's no cars, there's no property behind the,
Well, the
Barn.
shed, the garage that you have behind the house.
How is it accessible?
You know
Is
what?
there another driveway?
there's no other building.
You can see this easier on Google
Right.
Maps. You can
But
zoom
I see what- I see
closer,
what
better.
you're
But he says there wasn't
How
a
do you get
multiple
there?
driveways.
Right.
They said there was only one.
Yeah, I don't think you can have multiple in that zone, if I remember correctly. That's a good question.
How do you get
How do you
back?
get back there? You probably just gotta drive it on the grass next to the house,
Yeah.
it looks like.
Which it's there, it's not my yard. I don't know.
That's a close, I think that's a
That
better
is neighbor's
view.
barn, I think the white,
So where
This is
the-
your neighbor's barn,
yeah,
but
not
this is your barn,
This
yeah.
barn, but how do you access that? Is there,
that's neighbor's barn that.
Your barn.
that she-
no, you're on
How do you
your
access
barn,
your
how do you
barn?
access your barn?
Pardon?
This one, where he has if you could put the arrow,
Yeah.
Brian, yeah. Where
Oh,
he has,
that's the one.
that's yours?
Yeah.
How do you get there? If you store cars, your vehicles, how do you get to the vehicles? Like,
Well,
how do
there's
you
a
come-
side, we have a 25 feet access from adjacent to the garage to the property line. And there's a dirt driveway that leads up to it.
Here, let me show you
I see.
I mean, if you go further close into, yeah, that's right.
here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there, yeah.
There's,
Yeah. There is a dirt driveway, runs parallel to the concrete driveway that goes to the back of the building, the house into the garage.
yeah, I'm trying to get over, there you go.
Oh,
You
there
can
it is.
see
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
back there.
I see.
That's, I
So
think,
that's not the primary driveway,
No.
25 feet.
that's just an access. It's not
But then
paved.
here's the
Yeah, that's-
here's the
There's the
primary driveway
driveway.
and here's the garage.
Okay. Could you, is there,
That's awfully close to the other neighbor's yard,
can,
but it's been there.
Mr. Shorkey, can you go closer on that view if we can see the front of the ADU, where the proposed ADU would be? Is there,
I
I
can
know there's
try.
trees, yeah, I know the
Trees are
trees
there.
are there.
Oh, that's the one.
Like that?
Okay, there
Okay.
you go. Okay, so there's the entrance, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at there.
Yeah, there's a
Little picture.
drawing in your packet, a floor plan. and
I see
think
the floor
that's
plan, it's just hard to imagine and
Yeah.
picture it how it relates to the home, because
I can't upload
I
it.
hear what Member Trezise is saying about the duplex.
I can
and it
tell
being
you
like- Right, I mean, it's
There's a
the same
doorway.
structure, there's a door between the two.
And if they're gonna block that
They're gonna
door, that's
block
how
it.
they're gonna separate it.
It looks like there's a third door.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a door on this structure.
Can I, excuse me, can I pass this photo just in case?
Yes, yeah, if you have any photos, that would be extremely helpful. Thank you, Mr. Singh.
Here.
Right, yeah.
Well, this is a
the
clearer
main-
picture of what you're currently looking at.
Thank you. That was
Sorry, I misunderstood
helpful.
you.
Door in the window.
So that's the door and a window, okay. And there's only one entrance to with the proposed ADU.
Right.
So the driveway is that access back to the barn. It's
Yes.
that dirt
Yeah,
drive, okay.
that's a limestone driveway, right?
Okay.
This,
It's just not, it's not paved, so it doesn't,
no, it's not paved, it is.
okay. So it doesn't count against that, having the pavement and the. Okay. I think the biggest question that everyone has is, and I'll just read your minds right now, is that if this is an ADU and if the size is appropriate. Now, it's existing, so what is going to, again, it's always my biggest hurdle to cross is the practical difficulties. It's existing.
Access.
Right, and it's, sorry.
Yeah, remember, yeah, I know.
No, you bring up a good point, because it is existing. So I think it would be a little burdensome on the applicant if the township were to say, oh, you're limited to 600 feet, it's a hard line, therefore you need to, first of all, spend the money to demolish this and then build 600 feet onto it. When you already technically have 600 feet there, you have a little bit more than 600 feet. But I think just having that be a requirement that they would have to remove a portion of this
Right.
would be putting in potentially another, financial burden on the property owner, where they probably wouldn't even go through with this, to be honest. I mean,
Right.
depending on his financial situation, which is not part of the background of this, but.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point that you bring up, Ms. Chair, that this is an existing structure that they're just turning into this ADU and not building something.
Right.
Thanks, Brian.
Thoughts, comments, concerns on the size
Well,
of,
one issue in the ordinance says access, the primary structure and the ADU shall share the same vehicular access to the property. They do not.
so that is a question that I have as well. Now looking at these
Yeah.
and
so-
looking and seeing this picture, which gives us a clearer view of the property, but also lets us know there is a secondary access.
So the intent is, another way to state what that means is, if you want to do an ADU, it's not a duplex, you can't build it, you're not allowed to build a separate driveway.
Okay.
So when it says they have to share the access, it means literally that whoever rents that is going to have to use the primary driveway, or in this case, he's got an access going.
I got it's
with that property.
existing, so it's not, he's
But
not.
the point is, he's not building a new driveway
He's not
or an
creating a driveway.
ADU.
Right. He's not
In
creating a
that,
driveway.
in that photo though, that's a separate entrance.
Correct,
But it's an existing one, is what he's
correct.
saying.
And it's there.
Yeah, it's existing.
Well,
Are you talking about the physical entrance to the property or the access road?
the access road.
So that's what he's saying. He's saying it's since it's existing, already. They're not building.
A little picture, a little peek behind the curtain. One of the things that have asked for to move
Yeah.
this forward is the applicant claims that there's an MDOT permit for that driveway. I've asked for that to move this forward. When I say
Okay.
there's other requirements, this is one hurdle, but
Okay.
I want that documentation.
So that
too.
still is yet to
No,
be.
he says, I'm not questioning that he has it, but I do need a physical copy
Yeah.
of it.
And that, so without that,
Without that, though, the ordinance says that anyone who rents this has to park in the driveway and walk across the grass.
Or they could extend the driveway to the other, around the house.
You can't, you could, we don't have a driveway permit. We routinely let people expand their driveway.
Right.
Up to a maximum of their front yard coverage, obviously.
right.
But it's not a new driveway, and that's the point.
But does this access road, does that contribute to that coverage? Because it's not paved.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
does,
Yeah, a driveway's, we don't, residential doesn't have a requirement for
for pavement.
for pavement.
Okay.
So it does go toward the overall percentage. I think he's got.
He's got plenty of acreage.
Yeah, he's got plenty of room.
He's got plenty of acreage.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of space, so
Yeah.
that wouldn't be a variance,
Yeah,
that would be
I'm not-
potential.
Yeah, I'm not worried
Okay.
about that.
I could take a stab at criteria,
Well,
but I don't think that we're not. Go ahead,
I
Mr.
think,
Desai.
I think the problem in my mind with this is in effect, we're allowing Mr. Singh to create a duplex in an area that does not allow duplexes by calling it an accessory building, which exceeds the limits of the ordinance.
I'm still really curious about what the intent of the ADU ordinance in of itself is.
The intent?
If it's meant to be, I mean, if it's an accessory dwelling unit, so it's meant to be living space.
Mhm.
It's meant to be self-sustaining or
Contained.
contained living space. And it is in ordinance allowed to share walls. We're over the 600 square feet, but we're under the square footage of the home, the existing primary residence. But what would be, I guess, the definition or the line between duplex and ADU? That would be my
Well, I mean,
wonder.
600 square feet.
yeah.
600 square feet
I mean,
versus,
no, I'm not.
That's actually true.
no.
it's
If-
only,
if-
it's meant to be a very,
And there's
to
some.
be modest, it's meant to be a tiny home, essentially.
Yes, and a duplex comes with certain, like, other regulations too, like, now you're doubling the minimum parking. An ADU doesn't contribute to the
To
home's
the-
parking calculation,
Okay,
but a duplex doubles that parking calculation. Things like that,
okay.
you know,
Does it require separate utilities for a duplex?
yeah,
Its own standalone.
yeah.
ADU
And just like the
requires the
ADU
opposite.
though.
And ADU does require separate utilities.
Well,
But they have to be tied
now,
into the main.
let me clarify.
Okay,
It has to connect to the house.
it has to connect to main. Okay, interesting. So that's
Yeah.
another. Okay. Remember,
I'm stuck with Mr. Tresice as well. I'm still hung up on the square feet. In my eyes, you know, I've done what Mr. Shorkey has done in different states, and, you know, ADUs for what they're trying to do with those, based on the definitions, is try to allow another dwelling unit to be built on a single-family dwelling lot. But there's a lot of stipulations technically, and one of them is it must be accessory. It must be subordinate to the main use so that it doesn't compromise and look like it is comparable to the main use, because now you do have a duplex situation, and that can get out of hand very quickly.
Yeah.
That was my biggest concern when I saw this was, what's the size of the full house? Because I was like 1,000 square feet, that's huge. That's a regular single-family home.
Right.
In my eyes, this will be, my opinion, this is my opinion on the board, this would be accessory to the main house, just based on the size. However, I do have other concerns, such as what the other board members had brought up with the driveway and the access to it. And the intent, this is a brand-new zoning ordinance that just was passed and adopted by this board last year.
Yep.
I don't think the intent of that ordinance was to say, okay, we're going to make this rule, but then we're going to allow it to be broken right away on a certain situation.
Yeah.
However, where it's tricky for me is, you brought up the great point, is that this is an existing structure that's there. It'd be different if he just wanted to build a separate structure and say, oh, I want to build 1,000 square feet and not 600. Screw your 600, I'm
Right.
sorry, I shouldn't say that for the record. Forget your 600, I want to build 1,000 square feet separate. To me, I would be more inclined to say, no, I don't agree with that, just based on the intent of the ordinance. This is already an existing structure. I don't think this township has it in its will or required to tell somebody you need to demolish part of your home and stick with this ordinance. In order for us to do that, that's essentially what we would be requiring him to do, or build a whole nother 600 square foot structure somewhere on this property, which, looking at this map, good luck trying to find that and still have access to it through a driveway. So that, to me, that would be a burdensome on to the applicant. But I'm still stuck on, like what you said, the size of this, the second driveway. This is, to me, I would almost feel more comfortable trying to go through the criteria and see if we can evaluate those individually, and because I'm kind of teeter-tottering on the back and forth of it. I don't have an issue with it being accessory based on the size of the main structure, but I'm stuck on the size of the accessory and the intent of the actual zoning ordinance. Just what Member Precise kind of brought up as well.
Right. Right.
I probably just confused the heck out of whoever's taking the minutes, but
They do a great job. They can figure that one out.
I have a question.
Yes, Member Brooks, go ahead.
When we do this, so if one of us says, everyone has to be on the same page for this, right? For this variance to be approved?
No.
We can,
Or is it
we can,
it can
we
be
can
a
approve
three?
with three.
Oh, okay,
We can approve with three.
okay.
We can approve with three. I think that, the way that I typically prefer and like to run, and not that everybody has to agree with everything, is that we, do have some kind of consensus at least. And we do have a quorum with three, so we can approve with three. All right. I will start with the criteria, because I think that's where we'll end up anyway. So, criteria number one is unique circumstances exist that are peculiar to the land or structure that are not applicable to other land or structures in the same zoning district, and these unique circumstances are not self-created. This is one that's not very easy for me to meet, because my worry is that there are other potential structures that exist that could go this route. As Mr. Shorkey pointed out, not that we can use this as precedent for another ADU case, but that that could potentially be something that could occur. Yes, Member Chase.
I can't see this as a unique circumstance. Frankly, it's a house. It's been a house. It's a single-family dwelling. It's because he wants to, in effect, subdivide his house and provide an accessory dwelling unit. That is his decision. That is not anything that's created outside here. So this is simply a home in an RR district that he wants to subdivide and sell or rent part of it. And I don't see that as a unique difference than any other home that may be in a RR or other neighborhood. It is not preventing him from using it the way it was built and what it was designed for. And I don't see how this is a unique circumstance. The fact that he's got an existing building doesn't mean anything because another large home could decide they wanted to do this.
That's where I
So
have a challenge with
it is not unique.
Yeah, that's right, the challenge with the uniqueness. Mr. Singh, can you tell us a little bit about the home and what the decision is to separate into that ADU? Like, obviously, I'm going to ask, did you try other ways of thinking about or using this structure? Is it currently being used as part of your living space, or it's not being used, so how can we use it? What was the intent behind applying for the ADU?
This being an independent structure with its own living, bedroom, bathrooms and stuff, it could be an independent structure away from the main structure I'm living in. So it does qualify under ADU, according to definitions.
And no one is currently, you don't reside in it, nobody occupies that space, so that space is just vacant in,
It's vacant right now.
Okay.
There's only two of us living in the house.
so those two, the main home and the potential ADU structure, they're connected just by a door.
Yeah,
They share one wall, but there's a connection with just one door between the two
there's
structures?
one door that could be shut off with the drywall, by code, and that'll be separate main entrances.
And so this was existing on the property when you bought the property, correct? This structure was existing on the property when you bought it?
Yeah, the one ADU, I bought it in 95. That was the way it is, 10,000 square feet back then, and still the same thing. So we added extra addition to the existing ADU, the ADU in question, and then we added another 1,900 square feet following that. So it is a total of 3,000 square feet, something like that. That time my whole family, my son, daughter, everybody lived there. So it was useful. Now they're all gone. I'm just living all alone there. So.
Okay. So so what is the proposed ADU was actually the initial dwelling on the property, and you built the primary structure over that time?
The primary structure I should define as the one bought in 95. That's the primary structure. Then I added on 1,900 square feet following that back in 2008. So that the ADU in question is the original structure, and the addition is the one I'm living right now.
Okay.
So
The hard part about that for me is that then it becomes can we pull up the picture of the home? Just so that I can clarify. No, not on the Google Maps, the one that Mr. Singh had in the packet.
Okay, yeah. Where's
Just that,
Oh,
is it
there.
like page
Here,
14,
23 in the packet?
there you go.
Yeah, there we go.
okay.
So, just so that we can be on the same page, Mr. Singh, this structure that you live in, the two-story structure with the balcony and the garage and the additional living space,
Yes.
all of that is new as of when?
yes,
Is 2008, it was when all of that was built?
yes,
Okay, so the proposed ADU was what you bought on the property in
Yeah.
1995?
yes,
And then you have built the other part of that structure with the porch and the two-story home, the balcony, the garage, and the living space above the garage. That is all what you've built since 2008?
yeah.
Okay, so that is where, that's going to be my challenge, is going to be the circumstances are not self-created. Because in building the homes attached and building the homes connected, we essentially built one large home, and I can then see where Member Trezise is saying this is just one large home we're trying to subdivide. So that's, I do have issue with criteria. I almost always can say yes to criteria number one. I can find a way to make it unique. But this is the challenge, is that it's not even the uniqueness, it's that these circumstances are not self-created. But I could see the need to build onto to the home, especially if you had other family members living with you at the time. But the challenge then becomes, again, that the ordinance or the variance stays with the property, and what happens? What happens to it in the future? So I am not able to meet criteria number one, and I don't know how to be convinced of that one. So if is anybody able to reach criteria number one?
No, I mean, I think part of the issue is that it's 1,075 square feet, so it's not double, but it's like 75% over. So if it was like 800 or something, and that's what the shape of the structure was, then I could see that. But based on the shape of the structure, if we pulled back some of the rooms in some way, then it would fit within that ADU criteria. Otherwise, I think it's too big.
Yeah, and we start talking about in comparison to primary, but this was primary at some point. So it is size of a primary residence attached to a primary residence, which I think is where I'm having the challenge in reaching that. I think that if we look at, I would not feel good if I didn't look at other criteria, but strict interpretation and enforcement of the literal terms and provisions of this chapter would result in practical difficulties that would prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted purpose. And I would struggle to reach that criteria as well. Because it's a single family home as it is, and that is the permitted use for it currently, it meets that. I don't find a practical difficulty with that inherently, because it is a home that is livable, and that is what the
zoning calls for.
The zoning calls for that, absolutely. So in trying to take a portion of this and put it into the ADU shaped box, I'm having a hard time with that, with the practical difficulties of that.
Quick comment.
Yes, member,
And I'm-
go ahead.
I'm trying to be as unbiased as I can, so not taking one side or another with this, even though I'm, on a board for a township. But, I'm trying to see if there's ways that these can be interpreted differently, and if there's, different interpretations can go either way with this. The only practical difficulty I could potentially see, because right now, if the applicant says, all right, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to stick with my 3,000 square foot house. I got a single family house. Technically, there's nothing stopping him except maybe financial and connecting water and things like that, which would be financial. There's nothing stopping him from saying, I'm going to retract this, I'm going to keep my 3,000 square foot house, and I'm going to build a 600 separate or attached whatever. I'm going to build a separate 600 square foot ADU. I'm going to keep my it'll be accessory, it's within the guidelines. Financially, that may not be what he can do. That's maybe why he's requesting to do this in the current home. So he doesn't have to demolish, build something new. So I could see that as the only potential difficulty. However, there's an argument to everything. To me, the argument against that would be take half of that building right there. And, your 1,075 square feet. Can you take half of that and cut that out? Or not cut it, but keep it as part of the single family home and use half of that for the ADU. There's your 600 feet. Or is there another way to do it, such as if you're not utilizing that barn fully, he said that was 30 by 40, that's 1,200 square feet. Cut that thing in half, there's your 600 square feet for an ADU. However, now you gotta run water and, so again, it's back to the financial difficulties potentially there. So I think there's arguments on both sides to be made for some of these things, but I agree that it's how this board wants to interpret it is how the outcome of this is gonna be. And I'm not citing one way or another, but I'm just trying to see from all sides. And, yeah, this is a difficult one, especially for me because of the situation. It'd be different if this was I think, to me, the biggest difficulty is, I'm gonna blame it on you because you brought it up, is this being used within the existing structure? Because I didn't realize where it was gonna be. I was gonna be one of the questions, was that hand drawing, it looked like it was gonna be a separate structure.
Right.
As soon as you had confirmed that this is existing structure, I'm like,
That's-
oh, that changes the game for me.
That changes the game for me.
So-
And I was hoping for you, Mr. Singh, because I was
Yeah.
hoping that if it was a separate structure, we could make argument for size. I could probably, even though Member Brooks rightly points out that it is a substantial increase in the 600 square foot of the ordinance.
It is.
It's not what I would call minimum action by any means, but we could probably, talk about it.
And
Member
I
Chisholm.
guess I don't think the intent of the accessory dwelling unit ordinance was to provide for someone who's got a lot of extra area in his house because his family has grown up, to thereby declare a portion of it an ADU.
Well, no, but I mean, in any circumstance, right? It could be in any,
Yeah.
Circumstance aside, regardless of who's living there, if that was the intent of the ADUs to provide dwelling space, could be any number of circumstances that get there. But is it a practical difficulty?
Yeah. I don't see that.
Well, I think and this is coming back to Mr. Shorkey's point about like why we decided on the 600 square feet, even though I can't remember why. But when you mentioned and I was there at the time, but when you mentioned the duplex or multifamily zoned properties, then they could have multiple, I think at least you could have multiple multiple residences that were of that size.
Yeah.
So like this, it's possible that this is a rezoning request I don't know.
That was
exact-
one of the things that we discussed. When, at the beginning of this discussion, I said we sat down with the applicant and discussed some
Yeah.
options. That is an option. If you look, this is one of those, the master plan, the future land use map line is right here. But this is RDD. That's a multifamily designation with where duplexes are allowed by right. And that Mr. Singh owns.
Oh, well, that's handy.
But this but this line is the demarcation between that designation and single family designation.
So,
But it is right there.
but, okay, so I guess I'll ask the first part of this, my question to Mr. Shorkey, and the second part to Mr. Singh. The first part would be, so it is possible, is an option to pursue the avenue of rezoning
Yeah, absolutely.
parcel.
Absolutely.
Mr. Singh, why not attempt a rezoning of this property and go for the ADU? Knowing that you have such a big discrepancy on size.
Well, I think I actually wanted to rezone the property.
Okay,
And then I was told that the ADU just passed about 6 months ago or so, last year. So they asked me to apply for that as long as the square foot meets the zoning requirement. I told them that it's 1,000 square feet, against 600. So you had to go through the zoning board to have it looked at, approved, so before you can get the building permit. So,
okay.
so that's the way it was.
So maybe zoning board being First Avenue, rezoning being Second Avenue? Is that,
They're,
or is it just kind of a similar enough process that one or the other?
these are not, no, they're not similar
Okay,
process.
so that's why. Got it.
No, rezoning is
It's a much more
a public
extensive
hearing,
process.
2 meetings at planning commission, 3 meetings at the
Got it.
board. Yeah.
Got it. Okay,
But it
things are
would,
starting to make a little bit more sense.
but the rezone, if it was approved, would allow the applicant to do what they're requesting with the property,
Right,
per se.
right.
That wouldn't even, you wouldn't even have to consider that in
And
accessory dwelling.
and
You
at
could
that-
split that and call it two different
And call
dwelling
it two
units,
different
and it'd be
dwelling.
permitted by right.
But also, and that right could also add additional an additional
These
ADU
around here.
if necessary.
I don't know if, it depends on what the township, if the township allows ADUs in RDD zone.
Okay.
Any residential.
Is it any single family?
Single
residential?
family, yeah, it's a single family use.
So is RDD a single family?
No, it's a
use zone?
multifamily
Yeah,
designation.
so you wouldn't be
Okay,
able to.
so
put-
you wouldn't be able to.
But he wouldn't
But it
need
wouldn't matter.
He would just consider that
It
another
wouldn't-
dwelling
wouldn't
unit.
matter.
Because duplexes are allowed.
Yeah.
There'd be, setback rules and things
Right.
like that, but.
Right, but it would be permittable. So there's avenues. There's avenues to reach your goal. I do think this does give me shed some light on the situation. It does help a little bit to understand a little bit more about wanting to pursue the ADU first, ultimately, and if granted, that would save some challenging work to rezone. But I am still not quite able to I just the unique circumstances are not self-created is really the crux of the challenge or the crux of the criteria for me. Criteria number 3 is granting the variance is the minimum action necessary, which would carry out the spirit of the zoning ordinance, secure public safety, and provide substantial justice. I'm guessing Member Brooks and Member Chazais are not going to be able to meet that minimum action requirement on that criteria. Member Brooks is not going to be able to meet that minimum action. And when we get to criteria number 4, would be granting the variance and I'm not meaning to leave you out, Member.
Oh, you're
I
fine.
don't think you'd meet that minimum action either necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, there's arguments for everything.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that. But I tend to agree with.
I love your devil's advocacy there. Criteria number 4 is granting the variance will not adversely affect adjacent land or the essential character and vicinity of the property. I'm not concerned about the affecting the adjacent land. It's there. Nothing is
I would agree.
nothing is changing. So I can very much meet criteria 4. Criteria 5 is granting the variance will be generally consistent with the public interest and the purposes and intent of this chapter. And I struggle with this one because I don't know if this is in the spirit of the ADU ordinance, this new ordinance. It's new enough and it doesn't, I just don't know enough about it yet. So I struggle with criteria 5. So I can meet criteria 4, but I struggle with the others. So in light of that, I don't think that I would be able to support granting this variance this evening.
Can I ask a question to Mr.
Member
Shirky?
Koenig, go for it.
Mr. Shirky, is there, it's a very broad question, but is there, if the applicant were to withdraw this application, does the township still keep the application fee, or does it go back to the applicant? If they were to withdraw this application?
No, we've gone through the expense of noticing this and put staff time into this.
Okay, so the money stays, gotcha. Okay, that's all I had.
Yep. Any other thoughts or how we want to proceed?
I would make a motion to deny the variance request 2410 for 2020 M78 East Lansing, Michigan.
Support.
Okay. So this would be a motion to deny. Based on the inability to reach criterias
1 through
All
4.
five criteria.
Yeah, I think
1 through 3 and 5. correct.
1, 2, 3, and 5,
Yeah.
perhaps. Okay. Okay. Any support? Member book support and discussion on this motion.
I just wanted to say just one thing for the record. I will support the motion that was made. However, as you've already heard, Mr. Singh, I do think there are other avenues for you to go after if you really want to have an ADU on your property. Either a rezoning will allow you to do an actual, you'd still have to work with the township, but a potential, I would talk with Mr. Shorkey when we're done here. Potential rezoning might be an option that you wouldn't even have to consider that an ADU. It would just be considered as a second dwelling, because duplexes, 2 dwelling units would be allowed under that RDD zone district. Or if you have the financial resources, which I don't know if you do, there would be nothing stopping you from saying, I'm going to keep this whole 3,000 square foot house and I'm going to build a separate ADU. That's always an option as well. Figuring out where to put it, because you'd have to have access with the regular driveway, that'd be your challenge, and how to connect the water and sewer and all that things. But that's if you have the financial means to do that. But I think your rezone, I would definitely encourage you to try to work with the township and talk to them about the rezone option and see if that might be viable for you, because it sounds like it may get you at the end what you want.
Yep.
But I would tonight support the motion made on this variance request.
Yeah. And I would add, Mr. Singh, I think that it sounds like there's some other challenges and hurdles still to cross between you and the planning department, as far as the driveway and some other issues that maybe even granting this variance may not get you to that, having that ADU. So perhaps the rezoning is the better option here for you in order to get those requirements met more easily. Not that a rezoning is an easy process, but it sounds like there's still quite a bit of work to go through with planning and building department.
So what is the reason that this is denied exactly?
So the reason would be, beginning with our criteria. Our first criteria is that unique circumstances exist that are peculiar to the land or structure that are not applicable to other land or structures in the same zoning district, and these unique circumstances are not self-created. We are finding we are not able to reach that criteria, meaning we're not able to agree that these unique circumstances exist in this home and that they are not self-created. Because remember, we spoke about how the home was existing and then you built onto the home and built the newer primary residence to the home. So that in that, not being able to reach criteria number 1, not being able to reach criteria number 2, 3, and 5 is why we're struggling. We are not able to approve this. We have not voted, but that's what the motion is for, based on those criteria not being able to be met. We did not find that we could meet the criteria of that the literal terms and provisions of this chapter would result in practical difficulties that would prevent the owner from using the property for the permitted purpose. Since you are in the home and you're dwelling in the home, and it's able to be used as a primary residence, that is, we're not finding that it's a practical difficulty to not grant the usage as an ADU property for the original structure. And criteria 3 says that granting the variance is the minimum action necessary, which would carry out the spirit of the zoning ordinance, secure public safety, and provide substantial justice. Again, we were not able to meet this as a minimum action because the ADU size is 600 square feet, and this is at 1,075. Is that correct? Being at 1,075 square feet, that would be, it's not a minimum action. It's, as one of the board members here pointed out, would be a large percentage higher than what that 600 square feet maximum is for the ADU. And also that we're still in criteria number 5, that it's generally consistent with public interest and the purposes and intent of this chapter. We are, because that ADU designation is so new to us and we're still trying to understand what it is, we are not, we're not able to see that it meets the spirit of what the ADU ordinance states and what it's there for, which is to be a smaller, dwelling This is, as we pointed out a couple times during our discussion, a larger, almost a single-family home existing that then was built next to, you know, another larger primary residence was then built next to it, and that, you know, they are essentially connected so that it's not existing as its own, as an ADU is designed to do, as we're interpreting it from that ADU ordinance. Does that help to kind of understand our way of thinking in this?
Yeah, I understand it.
Okay.
The original structure was built like that. I mean, I can reduce it.
I know.
To 600, I'll knock it off some, maybe in the back.
Right, and that is something I think Member
I mean,
Koenig
if I
pointed out.
had to knock out, I probably had to eliminate one bathroom, probably
Yeah,
1,200 square feet, 120 square feet will be off, still be above 600 level.
right,
So
Right.
it's not going to happen. This
Yeah.
is, it's a grandfather, square feet, so that's what I'm coming from.
right, and that's kind of the challenge, is that it was, because it was pre-existing to the, now where you do live in the primary residence, that is the challenge that we're having, is that when you built the primary residence, you made this into a very, very large home now. So it's 1,900 square feet on one side and almost 1,100 on the second side. So we're almost at 3,000 square feet total. But in adding on and making that larger primary residence that you live in, this created kind of a strange balance between the two. And it's just not quite small enough to be an ADU, but also not large enough to be as large as the primary residence you're currently living in. So it is a very, very difficult and strange circumstance. But we didn't find it as pointed out earlier, the home itself being 3,000 square foot total. If we add the original square footage that we're wanting to talk about being an ADU with the current primary residence that you live in, we're looking at a total of 3,000 square foot. If somebody else also in the RR district said, oh, I have a 3,000 square foot home and I want to create this part of my house to be an ADU. That's the challenge we're having with that, is that it's just a very, it doesn't quite go with the spirit of that ADU being its own smaller, independent dwelling unit.
So would you approve, I can withdraw the application as long as the money is returned to me so I can go the other route?
Well, Mr. Koenig did
Yeah,
ask that,
it would
because I
be.
think that's what he was wondering, and what he was concerned with is, unfortunately, Mr. Shorkey did confirm that it wouldn't be an option, because it's already been, there's time that the staff members have spent on putting together this case for us. It had to be put in the newspaper to promote it, for the public notice. So that's already money that's been spent by the township on this case. So it wouldn't be able to be withdrawn. But we do, and again, we haven't voted yet, but I think all of us would really strongly encourage you to attempt to rezone that area.
So this decision of this board will help me to expedite the process of rezoning?
We can discuss it further in the office. Okay, I'll be happy to sit down and talk to you about what to do from this point.
So somebody says it's going to take 2 years to get that through, so I won't be living that long.
It will not, it's not a 2-year process. We can talk further.
Yeah.
So the first opportunity is to rezone the property, then get the zoning for the duplex?
We can talk further and also explain the process, okay, from this point forward.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't, because that's a separate, that would be a separate entity that would handle that case. But we have to go based on what we have in front of us. And that's why we find ourselves in a difficult situation. It's never easy to deny a request, because we want to be able to help as many citizens as possible get there. It's that we need to do our due diligence and make sure that we're following all those criteria. And in order to not only be fair, but also to be just and follow the ordinance as closely as possible. And knowing that there are exceptions that need to be made here and there, that's why the board exists. But we do have to try to adhere as closely as we can. We've tried to make some arguments. I know Member Koenig had some excellent arguments for approving this variance, but I think ultimately we were going to have even if Member Koenig and I could get to those arguments, we would be split in half. I do think we would not have been able to reach a yes vote. So. If we have any further questions regarding the motion on the table, which is to deny this variance request, I will take those at this time, and if not, then I will go ahead and take a vote. Okay, this is a vote to deny the variance request in ZBA case number 24-10 for the inability to meet the criteria number 1, 2, 3, and 5. Excuse me for the minutes taker. Member Koenig.
Yes.
Member Brooks.
Yes.
Member Trezise.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So unfortunately, your variance request has been denied. But Mr. Shorkey and staff and the building and planning department will be happy to talk you through and get you to the next steps to start going through the process of hopefully getting that rezoned.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. We really appreciate you being here tonight.
You want to come in about 11 o'clock tomorrow? Yeah. Okay, I come at 10:40, 11 o'clock, we'll talk about what we do from this point forward, okay? No, 11 o'clock. I don't want 11 at night.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Singh. All right, that brings us back to, do we have any other business? We do not. We have no other business on the agenda, and so then I will open the floor to public remarks, if we have any public remarks this evening. And don't all jump up at once to go up there and tell us how entertaining these meetings are. On that note, I will close public remarks and open it to board member comments. Thank you all for being here, and I appreciate you holding down the fort for a very long and challenging meeting in June, so I appreciate you all being here, and other than that, I don't have any other remarks. All right. On that, I will close board member comments, and this meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
In 2 hours.